This is TG Wolff, and today we welcome another new author to Mysteries to Die For, Nick Andrachik. So Nick has written award-winning short stories for magazines and anthologies. His stories, which range from classic whodunits, like he wrote for us today, and all the way to hard-boiled crimes and suspense thrillers. Find his work by searching for his name, that's Andrachik, Andreychuk, at your favorite online book retailer. Welcome to Mysteries to Die For. I am TG Wolff, and I'm here with Jack, my piano player and producer. This is a podcast where we combine storytelling with original music to put you at the heart of a mystery. All of our stories are structured to challenge you to beat the detective to the solution. These are arrangements, which means instead of word-for-word readings, you get a performance that's meant to be heard. Jack and I perform these live, front to back. No breaks, no fakes, no retakes. This is Season 7, Games People Play. Games are about competition conducted according to rules with participants working toward a goal. Games are a part of every culture and are one of the oldest forms of social interaction and engagement. As we all know, games can be fun, they can be challenging, and they can even be exhilarating, like when you're, winning money. They can also be intense, cutthroat, and they can be lethal. This season, our authors have fashioned deadly games and unscrupulous villains to test your detective skills. This is Episode 10. A Scavenger Hunt is the featured game. This is Hunting for Clues by Nick Andrachik.
I love the phrase hard-boiled crime. What does that mean? Visualize a hard-boiled crime. Are you just putting a book in a pot of boiling water? It's got to be hardback. It's not paperback. It's a hard-boiled crime.
It means it's like hardcore, It's not like these cozy ones where it's all about kittens and quilting and apple pies and oh yeah, somebody dies, but it's like off camera and hard boiled. It's gritty and it can be bloody. And
are your eggs gritty and bloody after you hard boil them?
Why are you equating
what else do
mysteries?
You hard boil? What other foods do we hard boil besides crime and eggs?
Okay, so you have a point that I can't think of anything that we hard boil besides crime and eggs.
Right? I'm just saying, of all the phrases for us to have chosen, it's strange that we use the word that we use to cook a liquid egg, like a jelly liquid egg, into not a hard substance.
Well, what if it was a poached crime
solid.
or scrambled crime?
Well, then that would give it a different context.
An over easy, over medium, over hard?
Nonetheless, I was just wondering where we got the phrase hard-boiled crime.
Well, since neither of us is ready to dive down the internet rabbit hole on that because we have a story to read, we are just going to have to leave this mystery to another time.
That's true. And in case you're wondering, my setting on my keyboard is flute and oboe.
Oh, both?
Yeah, it's a flute and oboe combo. You can kind of hear it, like it's a little bit like a nasally flute. Like you have that like soft wind in the back. It's really that supporting feature, and then you just have the nasal. It's kind of like, I don't know. I like it.
It is pretty. We'll see if it goes with today's story.
We'll see.
Fake truth or real fiction? Is truth stranger than fiction? Chris Dayton believes so. That's why he'd chosen to be a true crime writer. Unfortunately, his critics didn't believe it. They claimed he embellished the stories in his books. They said nosy neighbors foiling crimes only happen on sitcoms, and villains tying people to train tracks only happened in old silent films. Never mind that Chris had personally interviewed the survivors and studied the police files. He had to be making it up. Just because he had made up one small thing and gotten caught. His last book was based on a well-known case, and his publisher had wanted to claim shocking new details inside. To appease them, Chris revealed that the killer's wife knew her husband murdered someone and claimed she admitted it. What she actually admitted was that she washed his blood-stained clothes. Surveillance video from the crime scene showed that the clothes were covered in gore before she destroyed the evidence. Only when she tearfully told the press that she hadn't noticed, Chris Dayton became the bad guy of the story. Since everyone believed his stories were fictional, he decided to reinvent himself as a mystery novelist. Problem was, despite being accused of making things up, Chris did not have the imagination of a fiction writer. Fortunately, he'd been invited to shadow his friend, Detective Becker, of the Seattle PD for a week to see if he could find inspiration from true crimes. Unfortunately, Becker's current case wasn't likely to provide enough fodder for a novel, though Chris could certainly make it work as a short story. Still, he'd have to be crafty with the clues because he didn't want the readers to figure out the whodunit too quickly. Chris looked across the bland hotel room at Becker's partner, Detective Lawnick, and had to stifle a laugh at the bewilderment on the detective's face. Lawnick met his gaze and scowled, then strolled over to him. "This is a real murder with a real dead body," he said, "not some hack-eyed story you made up in a coffee house, so stay out of my way and keep your mouth shut." "Actually," Chris said, in case you weren't paying attention when your partner introduced us, "I used to be a true crime writer. I didn't make up the stories." "Oh, I paid attention. I know who you are," Lawnick stepped back. "So don't go putting your new book where the maid is an accomplice to the murder because she put a bloody towel into her laundry cart." Chris took the gut punch and rolled with it. "Well, I can put that in if I want, since this time I'm writing fiction." Lawnick's eyes narrowed. "I don't care what kind of book you're writing. You better get my character right. Watch and observe." Chris shrugged. The more mistakes Lawnick made, the more entertaining his, quote, character would be. Although he didn't put much faith in the man he thought of as Detective Longneck, he expected Becker to solve the crime sooner rather than later. The detective was a big fan of his, so clearly he possessed exceptional instincts. While the detectives persisted in their hunt for clues, Chris spoke quietly into his phone's voice recorder app. He often transcribed his observations word for word into his stories. The scene of the crime is the PNW Coast Hotel, a few blocks up from the Pike Place Fish Market, but the bland room lacks the charm of that popular tourist destination. The air reeks of pine-scented cleaner that is failing miserably to mask the stench of wet dog, BO, and I don't want to know what else. The pillows and blankets on the queen bed are disheveled as if there's been a scuffle. Sure, tossing and turning could have caused the same effect, but Chris felt confident in his assumption, given the dead body laying sideways across the bed. The victim, Sam Jenkins, looks like a stereotypical computer geek, he said. Scrawny, middle-aged, with unkempt hair, wearing a checkered shirt with wire-rimmed glasses in the pocket. I'll definitely have to find a way to give the guy more personality. His only distinctive feature is a coin-sized birthmark at the base of his neck. No, scratch that. It's a tattoo. The guy actually has a spider tattoo on his neck. The spider logo from the Spider-Man costume, most likely given the circumstances. "Wow," Detective Lawnick said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "You figured out the victim, who is here at the Marvel Cinematic Universe fan convention, was a fan of Marvel's most iconic character, Spider-Man. That's some amazing detective work there. Next thing you're going to tell me is that Sam Jenkins was, gasp, murdered." Chris hit pause in the recording app. "Actually, I think it was suicide." Remote control. The now familiar look of bewilderment crossed Lawnick's narrow face. "You're not serious." "Think about it," Chris said, cutting Lawnick off. "A superfan like Sam Jenkins thinks he'll find camaraderie with other fans. Maybe even form a bond as tight as the member of the Avengers and—" "Their bond wasn't tight," Becker argued, joining them. Didn't you see Captain America Civil War? Well, yeah, but they reunited in Avengers Endgame, Chris pointed out. And who was the glue that bonded them together? Spider-Man? Lonick asked, looking more perplexed than ever. No, Iron Man, aka Tony Stark, Chris said. And who died in Endgame? Tony Stark. Okay, great. Thanks for the spoiler, Lonick said, slapping his hands against his legs. Chris turned to Becker. Do you believe this guy? I mean, who hasn't seen Avengers Endgame? Lonick rolled his eyes. Guys who don't still live in their parents' basement? My parents have watched all the MCU movies, Becker said, and my girlfriend would leave me for that Australian actor who plays Thor. She's watched the movies more times than I have. What does this have anything to do with Sam Jenkins committing suicide? Lonick asked, irritably. Isn't it obvious? Chris grinned. Jenkins was so distraught by the death of his hero, Spider-Man's mentor and father figure Tony Stark, that he couldn't bear to watch another MCU movie on his hotel room television. In a fit of despair, he rammed the remote control down his throat, suffocating himself. Lonick narrowed his eyes. If your stories are as ridiculous as that theory, you'll never make it as a fiction writer. Becker chuckled. Oh, come on, partner, admit it. He had you going for a second. Lonick looked away, embarrassed, and pretended to study the corpse. Chris couldn't help but do a voiceover. Tapping record on his phone, he said, The very serious, too mature for superhero movies, police detective stared hard at the bed, his thick, graying eyebrows furrowed. The maroon comforter would have hid blood well, had there been any, but suffocation was the obvious cause of death. The murder weapon? A TV remote. Whose fingerprints would forensics find on the remote? The room was registered in Jenkins' name, but 3 other men had been in it. Apparently, they were obsessive fans of all things Marvel, especially the movies based on the comic book company's most popular properties. Jenkins was in Seattle for a fan convention that coincided with an NCU exhibit at the city's Museum of Pop Culture. I wouldn't be surprised if all 4 guys' prints are on it, Becker said. I mean, how many guys do you know who won't try to control the remote control? Can't argue with that, Chris said, and Lonick nodded his agreement. So we probably can't rely on prints being conclusive, Becker said. Let's review what we know. Detective Lonick flipped open his notebook, shooting a look of disdain at Chris's phone. Well, we know the men were all strangers to each other. They met at the convention's dinner banquet last night and made plans to meet up here today. The victim drove up the coast from San Francisco. Suspect Bob Wu is a local who took a taxi here this morning. Suspect Wayne Smith drove here from Tacoma, and suspect John Reddy is a transplanted Brit who lives here in Seattle. Transplanted. I like that, Chris said. Mind if I use that in my story? Lonick ignored him and continued. All 3 men denied participating in or witnessing the murder. They each backed up each other's statements that they all left the hotel room at the same time. And of course, all 3 of them swore that Jenkins was alive and well when they separated to go off on the scavenger hunt. Could they all have played a part in the murder? Becker mused. I'm envisioning it now, Chris pointed toward the bed, closing his eyes as he imagined the scenario. 1 guy on each side of Jenkins, holding him down on the bed, while the 3rd guy shoves the remote down his throat. Crazier things have happened. Like what? Lonick asked. Chris opened his eyes and grinned at him. Lonick's expression soured. He no doubt regretted asking the question, obviously expecting another theory as serious as suicide by remote. A cougar stole a fish from the market last week, Chris said. Snatched it right out of the air when a fishmonger threw it toward a customer. I heard it was a mountain lion, Lonick said, but I have to admit that was pretty crazy. Mountain lions and cougars are the same thing, Becker said, waving a hand dismissively. I know I brought up the idea of these men working together, but let's focus on their individual motives and opportunity. Well, they did work together in a way, Chris said. Your partner overlooked something in his recap. The 4 fanboys didn't meet up today simply to hang out and argue about who'd win a race between the Flash and Superman. Those are DC comic characters, Becker interrupted. They wouldn't be talking about Marvel characters? Marvel's Quicksilver is not in the same league as DC's Flash, Chris shot back. So if they were talking speedsters, wait, what do speeders have to do with this case? Lonick said. Chris shrugged. Probably nothing. My point is that they met up this morning for a specific purpose. 4 to go. Lonick consulted his notes. Right. There's a scavenger hunt being played across the city in conjunction with the convention, and Reddy suggested the men join forces and split the $100 prize if they won. After they pulled together the items they already found, Becker said, there were just 4 items left to hunt for. They went off separately, with Jenkins searching for a 10-inch replica of the Space Needle, Smith a gold Derringer pendant, Reddy a package of Market Spice tea, and Wu a stuffed Bigfoot toy. They agreed to meet back up in the hotel lobby at noon, Lonick said. And when Jenkins was a no-show, the other 3 returned to this room together. The door was open, the deadbolt out, and stopped the door from closing fully, and they found Jenkins dead on the bed. Wayne Smith called 911 immediately. Not to harp on the idea of them being in this together, Becker said, but was I the only one who felt their stories sounded too similar? Like when we interviewed them individually, the moment each man realized they were a suspect, they all said the same thing. Do you really think I'd come back here if I murdered him? I loved how you rolled your eyes and told them that if they'd taken off, it would have obviously painted a bullseye on their back, Chris said. And, Becker continued, each one of them suggested we look into housekeeping, room service, maintenance, and the all-encompassing random stranger. Like we need them to tell us how to do our jobs, Lonick said. No, Chris said, you don't need them for that. That's what you have me for. Lonick sighed and turned to his partner. Wasn't this Joker supposed to be a silent observer? Becker shrugged. Aside from his whispering into his phone, you have to admit that he kept quiet during all the interviews, including the ones with the hotel staff. Yeah, Chris said, even though I wanted to tell you that the housekeeper, Alberto, did not like you calling him a maid. Old habits, Lonick said. What matters is that the logbooks placed Alberto in a different wing of the hotel at the time of the murder. Chris chuckled as quietly as he was able to, and I really had to struggle to keep my mouth shut when the front desk clerk said that they thought they saw 2 of the 4 scavenger hunters pass by within minutes of each other about an hour before noon, but they couldn't say which ones because, quote, all those geeks look the same. Well, that's one thing we all agree on, Lonick said with a nod. We definitely agree on that, Becker said. I mean, sure, the men are superficially similar. All in their mid-30s, all have dark hair, all wearing superhero t-shirts, and none of them are in great shape or particularly attractive. But come on. Jenkins is white, Smith is black, Reddy is Indian, and Wu is Asian. I'm sure we all also agree, Chris pointed out, that Jenkins was the one of the 2 that returned early. My guess is that the murderer expected Jenkins to go to the Space Needle for a souvenir, but he just went to one of the tourist trap gift shops in the market instead, and then returned early and encountered an intruder in his room. And what is your guess on what the intruder was after? Lonick asked. Oh, now you want my opinion? Chris retorted, enjoying himself. I thought you wanted me to be a silent observer. Lonick recovered quickly. I was just being polite, for Becker's sake. I don't actually expect your opinion to be any more useful than the hotel's security cameras. The jab hit home. The hotel's security cameras were effectively dummies, their operating software being so outdated there were no drivers compatible with the hotel's recent computer upgrades. Well, have you checked the suspect's pockets? For Becker's sake, Chris chose to keep his reply to Lonick polite, refraining from adding the word duh at the end of his question. For what? Lonick shook his head. You think we'll find a knife or a gun? Newsflash, the murder weapon is still in the victim's mouth. I wasn't talking about the murder weapon, Chris said. You asked me what I thought the intruder was after. Something that belongs to Jenkins, Becker said. Right. Of course. I knew what he meant, Lonnick said to his partner. I was just kidding around with him. In fact, I was about to suggest we talk to the suspects again anyway. He turned to Chris and took a superior tone. We often find that asking suspects the same question over again causes inexperienced liars to fail at creating the same fabrication twice. Any discrepancies in their story would be a cause for suspicion at this point. He turned back to Becker. Let's split up this time to make this quick. I'm getting hungry.
Yay. Yeah. Anyway,
Is your microphone
cool.
working?
Yeah, my mic's working. It's
You know,
on.
unlike the ones that revolved around video games, I actually do know the Marvel verse, although I don't know the DC verse, so I can almost follow along the conversation.
Yeah, I agree. So who do you think did it? Also, I love Chris as a character. He's amazing.
You love Chris?
I like him. What's the annoyed cop's name? Lonnick?
Lonnick. Launek. Lonnick.
I saw it a few times when I was glancing over at your computer. Mainly, I only look over there to see what chapter we're on and to see how close to a break we are, so I know whether to wrap up my chord progression. But yeah, no, that's pretty nifty.
Oh, I like this one. It's kind of an unusual setting for us. It's not really a what do we call that? It's not a closed door.
Oh yeah, closed house, whatever it is.
Yeah, because it happens at this Comic-Con, but it's closed because it's really amongst this group of 4 individuals, one of whom is now dead.
Yes.
What'd you think of the murder weapon?
TV remote down the throat?
Yeah.
That's okay. If a nerd were to do that, if like one of these guys going to Comic-Con were to do that, I suppose I'm slightly surprised. I wouldn't be. I mean, I have a feeling it's one of the, what is it, 2, 3 roommates?
3.
Three
well,
roommates?
and they're not roommates; they're just friends.
Well,
they're newly acquainted friends.
Newly acquainted friends rooming in the same.
They're not rooming together.
Oh, they're not?
No, it is the dead guy's hotel room. The other guys were just in it.
Oh, I was under the wrong.
No worries. I actually thought that the first time, and Nick did have a clarifying line in there that I kind of requested. I'm like, where are they all sleeping if there's only one bed? It's like, there's only one bed because it is just, and I can't think of that guy's name right now. That is so horrible. Nick is the author. Nick is not the dead guy.
Oh my gosh. I'm so sorry, Nick. You are not dead.
I'm having a Jack moment where I can't remember names, so we have to wait to the deliberation to find out the name of the dead guy.
I know who the characters are based on the face I gave him in my head. The problem is that sometimes they don't tell you what a character looks like until after they give you a name. The second I hear a name, I give it a face. And then you tell me what the person actually looks like, and I'm like, whoops, wrong race. But then it's even harder to switch what they look like.
Oh, yeah.
So then I just sit there. Like that happened in the Percy Jackson series.
Yeah.
Grover,
yes,
is, I guess he's written in the book as black, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I didn't know that because I missed that line when we read that. You were reading to us as kids, so I didn't know he was black until the movie came out, which was really funny to me.
So our dead body is Jenkins and he's white. Smith is black. Reddy is Indian, and Wu is Asian.
Yes. Pretty cool.
Other than that, they're all mid-30s, dark hair, and wearing superhero t-shirts. And none of them are in great shape.
Well, can you expect them to be?
There's just all kinds of stereotypes that we're really in danger of jumping into feet first. So I'm going to say, let's go to the next chapter.
No, Big Bang Theory has basically taken those stereotypes and said these are true. See, here's proof that when you joke about them, you're right. It's like it's good self-deprecation comedy about these characters who are all nerds.
If everybody who met the stereotype was getting paid what those actors were getting paid at the end of the series, I don't think anybody would mind.
That's a fair point, dude.
All right.
Alrighty, let's get into it.
Sticky fingers. Without waiting for a response, Lonick went out to the hallway where a uniformed officer was watching the suspects who had been ordered not to talk to each other or use their cell phones. Becker shrugged, then followed his partner into the hallway. Chris went to the doorway and watched the detectives each pull one suspect aside. Chris unpaused his voice recorder app and tried to think of a way to describe each man in depth. But aside from their skin color, they were really unremarkable. Just 3 average height, non-athletic, heterosexual males. No crooked noses, piercings, or tattoos. Nothing to set them apart, except for the fact that one of them was a killer. He wandered back into the room, careful not to touch anything. Aside from a key card and the cardboard sleeve had come in, Chris didn't see anything on the dresser. He made his way to the back corner and studied the items on the room's one small table. The convention had dealer booths, and Jenkins had obviously been a collector. One side of the table had several signed Marvel comic books, and the other side had autographed photos of MCU actors in their superhero costumes. In between those, a bronze gauntlet adorned with costume jewelry took center stage inside a clear display box. A note-card-sized letter of authenticity stated, Marvel Avengers Endgame autographed Thanos replica gauntlet. Chris browsed the dealer's website on his phone, and his mouth dropped at the value of the toy on the table. As he scrolled through other Marvel collectibles, the coroner arrived and shooed him out of the room. He nearly crashed into Becker, who said, I was just coming to show you this. The detective grinned from ear to ear and waved a rubber mask in front of Chris's face as if it were the key to the entire mystery. Listen to this, he said. When I asked Reddy what he thought of Jenkins, he said that he was much more of a true believer than the rest of them. True believer? Chris asked. Is that a religious thing? No. Becker gave Chris a look that said, You're not so clever after all, are you? It's something that creator Stan Lee used to call Marvel comic fans. So, Reddy said, and I quote, The bloody bloke's a rat freak. He paid $1,000 for a Black Panther mask signed by Stan Lee. Then what he done was, he greeted each of us at the bloomin' door with it on this morning. So guess where I found this? Becker waved the mask in Chris's face some more. Shoved down Jenkins' pants? Chris asked, his gaze tracking on the mask. Don't be disgusting. I found it when I made Smith empty his pockets. Becker beamed with excitement. So what do you think? Before Chris could come up with a witty response, Lonick approached with a similar look of triumph on his face. He held up a clear plastic box that contained what looked like a puck-sized floor light. The card at the bottom of the box read, Stan Lee signed Marvel Iron Man Arc Reactor Light-Up Handmade Prop. I'll bet, Chris said, without giving the detective a chance to speak, that that's a prop from one of the MCU movies. Jenkins bought it at the convention for $1,000, and you found it on Ready or Woo. Lonick's chest deflated like a pinprick balloon. The veins in his long neck throbbed to an angry beat. How on earth did you know that? There's a fancy glove prop in the room that's worth $1,000, Chris said, and your partner just found another Jenkins costly True Believer memorabilia on Smith. Well, Lonick said, Wu told me that Jenkins made a big fuss about how this thing lights up, and then it just happens to be in his trunk of Reddy's car. As you said, it's worth $1,000, so I figured it's a pretty good motive. Yeah, Becker said. I thought the same thing when I found this trinket. Maybe the two of them really are in it together. Make that all 3 of them, Lonick said. He inclined his head toward where Wu stood down the hall, leaning against the wall. See the Spider-Man shoes he's wearing? Those are signed by Stan Lee as well, Chris said. Also worth about $1,000. Lonick blew out a long sigh through his nose. Okay, Becker said. Each of these guys are thieves. But are any of them murderers? Obviously, it only takes one person to shove a remote control into a man's mouth, and there are no bruises to indicate that Jenkins was held down by any accomplices. Not to mention that if we assume one of the men at the front desk they saw was Jenkins, Then, according to them, only one other person returned prior to noon. I find it hard to believe that 3 strangers could cover for each other, yet none of them are pointing fingers. They all have equal motives, none of them are acting particularly suspicious, and our eyewitnesses are useless. There has to be something we're missing. At this last point, Becker looked at Chris expectantly. Scared and wet. Chris still didn't think this case would translate into a novel manuscript, but even as a short story, he didn't want it to end too quickly, so he decided to give the detective a hint instead of a direct answer. "Why don't you try this?" he said. "Ask each of them who got caught in the rain this morning." Lonick looked at Chris like he was a few raindrops short of a full cloud. "Also," Chris said, "ask them if the mask scared anyone." Becker shrugged at Lonick. "Let's humor him." "Fine," Lonick sighed loudly, "but if this is a wild goose chase, your shadow is buying lunch." 5 minutes later, the detectives returned. Lonick approached with his shoulders slumped. He just glowered at Chris while Becker filled the writer in on what the detectives had learned. Wu got soaked in a sudden downpour while waiting outside for his taxi this morning. Becker looked at his notes. In Jenkins' hotel room, Wu took off his wet shoes and dried his feet with a towel from the bathroom. He was so miserable that Jenkins actually let him wear the Spider-Man shoes. "That sounds about right," Chris said. You both noticed the wet shoe smell in the room, right?" Just then, Lonick's cell phone rang. "I have to take this," he said, then walked over to the ice machine for some privacy. Chris wanted to see the look on Lonick's face when he explained things, so he planned to wait for the detective to finish his call, but Becker couldn't stand still. He shifted from foot to foot impatiently. "Come on," he said. "There's more to this than you're letting on. We can fill Lonick in later." "You're right," Chris said. "So tell me, if anyone was scared by the mask." "Actually, yeah. Supposedly Smith got pissed," Becker said. "Seems that story about the cougar sighting near here had him on edge." Interesting fact. The cougar holds the Guinness record for the animal with the greatest number of names. Chris ticked off the names on his finger. There's mountain lion, of course, puma, and panther, and my favorite is the catamount. Becker held up his hand, stopping the list. "Anyway, Jenkins said Smith could wear the panther mask at the convention letter, and that's when Smith shoved it into his pocket." "Well, that about covers it then," Chris said. "Case closed." "How?" Becker looked noticeably confused, and then a few seconds later a smile crossed his face when the pieces came together. "All right, Jack, we're at the deliberation."
Deliberate away.
All right, y'all. So you probably noticed by now we don't have any ads. In exchange for not making you hit the fast forward button, support our authors by checking out their backlist and picking up a title. This week is Nick Andrachek. Check him out. He's got a number of stories in both magazines and anthologies.
Man, you are tongue-tied today.
Sorry.
You're good. So list the names of the characters, because I don't remember the Indian man's name.
Bob Wu. He's the Seattle local who got drenched waiting for his cab. Wayne Smith. He is the Tacoma resident who drove in for the convention.
I see.
John Reddy, Seattle transplant from across the pond. Those are our 3 suspects.
It's Reddy because the other 2 were given their memorabilia. You know, wet foot guy got dry feet, and then scary pants got a mask. But Arc Reactor Man, he didn't need no reactor for arcing. You know, his battery didn't die. So give me the facts and let me reveal to you how it was Mr. Arc.
Okay, for our
Man.
podcast detective's sake, I'm going to read what I wrote down for the clue summary, okay?
Oui.
So on Reddy's suggestion, the 4 newly acquainted men were working together on the scavenger hunt. Each had one less item to find. They left Sam's room together, Jenkins's room together, planning to meet back up in the lobby at noon. Jenkins was found by the other men after he didn't show up at the meeting spot. He died in his hotel room, suffocated on his remote control, which really had to hurt. Can you imagine something that square going in a throat?
Like, that has to go deep to really stop
Deep.
all air. Because it's not like a... If it was circular, I could see it easily
You know,
stopping air.
you might like vomit in it and then swallow your vomit and suffocate
You
on the
wouldn't swallow,
vomit.
you'd inhale your vomit.
That's a
That's
good
how
point.
John Bonham died.
I'm just saying that might be the way that you suffocate.
Poor John Bonham.
2 front desk clerks testified that 2 men were seen returning around 11. They couldn't tell who. Despite being different ethnicities, the men were of similar stature and style.
Indeed.
Jenkins had brought, see, I gotta go tongue-tied again. Jenkins had bought several expensive pieces of memorabilia, as well as signed comic books and photos.
Yes.
Something Jenkins had bought was discovered on each suspect. Reddy had the Iron Man gizmo, Smith had the Panther mask, and Wu had the shoes.
I would just like to point out how nice of a guy Jenkins must have been to let a dude wear around a $1,000 pair of signed shoes around rainy, crappy, gross Seattle, and the other man to take a signed mask that could be damaged in any number of ways because he's scared of a cougar.
Yep.
That's a pretty nice dude. So props to you, Jenkins. You didn't deserve to get that remote down your throat.
So now it's time for all of our detectives to use their spidey sense on who Becker and Lonick should arrest. Jack is voting for John Reddy.
But why did Reddy kill him? Because it's just because he wanted something expensive. I mean, I guess he didn't. Jenkins didn't let them keep the object.
Yeah.
It was just to borrow it to fix an immediate problem. So
yeah. Mm.
I was just thinking, like, but if Reddy really wanted something, he could have just pretended he needed, like, a
new heart.
Yeah. Said,
I need a arc reactor because my heart is not what it used to be.
And we use arc reactors and not like actual muscles. Anyway, it is ready. I am ready. I killed Jenkins.
Yeah.
All right, let's go.
Another reminder that our print and ebooks are available. The companion book for seasons 4, 5, and 6 are available in ebook and trade paperbacks. This season book is being released in 2 parts. So back in March was part 1, the opening gambit. That is part of this where we are right now. Second part, the final move, will be released in September. Buy one for you and a mystery lover you love. The dimes and quarters from the sales really do support the podcast. Usually it keeps Jack in things, but today I think it's going to keep me in cold medicine or whatever that hopefully will tongue-tie my tongue. The end game. Lonick returned with a smug look on his face. "All right," he said. "I know who to arrest." "Ready," Chris declared. Lonick seemed taken aback. "How did you know?" "Because the other 2 didn't have to return to the room for their loot," Becker said. "Who do you think it is?" "Well, Reddy, actually. It turns out that Smith and Wu's records are clean. No priors. It took a while to get to Reddy's records from Britain, though. But apparently he's been accused of stalking and harassing people he's obsessed with. The actor who played Spider-Man placed a restraining order against him, and Reddy's not even allowed to enter the city of London." Becker looked at Chris and said, "Reddy was actually the truest believer, and he didn't have any opportunity that we know of to snatch that box arc reactor thing ahead of time. That's 2 strikes. I'd feel more confident if we had a 3rd strike against him. Any thoughts?" Chris nodded. "Sure. Reddy was the one who suggested they go on the scavenger hunt. He wouldn't be particularly interested in a chance to win $25 if he'd already stolen a $1,000 collectible. He used the scavenger hunt as an excuse to get the others out of the room." "One thing I'm still not clear on," Lonick said. "How did Reddy get back into Jenkins's room?" "Well," Chris said, "most hotel clerks automatically hand out 2 key cards and a sleeve. I noticed the empty sleeve on the dresser by the TV. It would have been easy for Reddy to grab one, maybe while pretending to reach for the remote control. My guess is he was hiding the key card, maybe under the remote, in case Jenkins had noticed it was missing. But before he could leave, Jenkins came in unexpectedly, and when he couldn't talk his way out of why he'd broken in, Reddy attacked with the remote in his hand." "And that's your final word on this case?" Becker asked. No, Chris said, hoping a little of the Stanley magic would rub off on him for his second attempt at a writing career. My final word in this case is Excelsior. The end.
I'm ready.
You're,
Whoops. Said the wrong word again. That was an amazing story. That's what I meant to say. Whoopsies.
you really dove right in on that one about
ready.
about the subtlety of the other two were given their
Well,
I was going to say given their gifts, but
in that little, hey, how did the other two get it? They didn't explain how Reddy got it. If
they didn't know how Reddy got it.
Exactly. That's why. Because if we know how the other two, but not how the third got it, immediately it's the third.
But it is still a subtle detail.
It is.
Good job. Good job.
Bueno. Coolio. So tell me about scavenger hunts. I would love to know. As a scavenger myself, sorry, I just realized I asked you a question and then interrupted you answering the question I asked you to answer. As a scavenger myself, I scavenge for what I call money in the couch cushions.
I thought it was for food.
Well, no, I'm a little better than that now. Don't worry. However, we were scavenging for toilet paper because I never tell you. So we're moving into an apartment soon. By the time this drops, we'll have been moved into the apartment, I think. Yeah, this is dropping in June, right?
Yes.
So hopefully we're in the apartment. And we figured out that buying toilet paper is expensive, but stealing toilet paper from a dorm bathroom is way easier and cheaper. So whenever they're going to refill toilet paper and they leave a full unused roll on the counter, it goes into my backpack or my shirt. It depends which is more convenient. So let's hope Ball State isn't listening to this, or I'll get kicked out. It's fine. We haven't.
And tell me, Mr. Wolff, why did you not finish your degree at Ball State?
We're paying way too much money for that toilet paper not to belong to us. Okay. It's not like we've taken that much.
I'm so proud of you at this moment.
No problem. Anyway, that's why we got gifted toilet paper for Christmas this year.
Yeah, somebody else felt bad for you.
Yep, pretty bad. Anyway, that's why I'm a scavenger.
Yeah. So according to Britannica.com,
I'm just gonna gloss past.
I am so gonna gloss past that one. We'll talk about it after we're done with this.
I see how it is.
American writer and hostess Elsa Maxwell is credited for creating scavenger hunts as a party game. Maxwell was renowned for her parties, both the A-list guests and the novelties that she created to amuse them. Maxwell was an interesting self-made woman. She was born in 1883, and she supported herself as a theater pianist and accompanist while in her teens. She worked with the Shakespearean troupe, in vaudeville, and then in music halls, all without having ever been taught music. She published some 80 songs over her lifetime. By the end of World War I, she was a professional hostess and event organizer across Europe. It is certainly believable that a woman as talented and just creative as Elsa Maxwell was both able to create games like the scavenger hunt that has this, this dual nature of being simple and yet endlessly creative. Wikipedia notes that scavenger hunts are held at American universities. Who knows, maybe they're looking for toilet paper. And that Escape Manor Inc. in Ottawa currently holds the Guinness World Record for the largest scavenger hunt with over 2,700 participants. I have links in the show notes to both Britannica.com and Wikipedia. Elsa Maxwell definitely is worth a few minutes of reading time, a very impressive woman. And then just all the places that scavenger hunts have gone from what were parlor parties. So I told you a little bit about Nick at the start of the show. But Nick Andrachek is our author today. He is a Derringer Award-winning mystery writer. His stories, which range from classic whodunits to hard-boiled crime, not eggs, to suspense thrillers, have appeared in numerous publications, including Bullet, Hard-Boiled Crime Scene, Sherlock Holmes Mystery Magazine, Plan B, Techno Noir, Who Died in Here, and Women's World. Reviewers have described Andrachek's work as clever, fast-paced, action-packed, quirky, and bloody brilliant. Well, that wraps up this episode of Mysteries to Die For. Support our show by subscribing, telling Mystery Lover about us, giving us a 5-star review. Check out our website, tgwolff.com/podcast, for links to this season's authors. Mysteries to Die For is created and hosted by TG Wolff and Jack Wolff. Hunting for Clues was written by Nick and Dracek. Music and production are by Jack Wolff. Episode art is by TG Wolff. Join us next week for Toe Tag. You all know that's a first chapter from a fresh release in their mystery, crime, or thriller genre. Then come back here in 2 weeks for our next original story, Marco Mayhem by Karina Bartaw, where Marco Polo is the featured game. All right, Jack and his multi-horn synth, whatever he's playing, take us out.